diagram below, for the diagram below, determine the value of x. Show your work set up for full credit. So we've got two triangles here. And so we've got the blue one, which is your smaller triangle. And then we've got this pink one, which is your bigger triangle. And what we want to do is we want to set up a proportion because these two triangles are similar to one another. So I do not know what x is. I feel like I'm missing a piece of information here. Oh, so the tick marks are, that's what I forgot about. The tick marks are telling us that this is also 7. So the short length of GA would correspond to the entire length of GT. So then the entire length would be 7 plus 7, which would give us 14. And then the 8 of the small blue triangle would then correspond with the x of the pink triangle because they're in the same position. They're both the base. And so now what we can do is we can cross multiply to find 7 times x equals 14 times 8. And then we can go ahead and multiply those together. 14 times 8. 14 times 8 is 112. And then that looks like a 7, 112. Let me rewrite that. And then we would divide by 7 to get x. 112 divided by 7. Would give us 16. So x is 16. So it looks like it's double the size. And number 5, Tyree planned to build a ramp from his window to the sidewalk so that he could skateboard right out of his window on his way to school. His window is 4 feet off the ground. So let's draw an example of his window. So his window is here. He is going to create a ramp to go outside of his window to the sidewalk. His window is 4 feet from the ground. And the sidewalk is 15 from his house. So then this would be your 15. Draw a diagram to represent the situation. So there you go. There's our situation here. This would be the window from his house. We want to know how long Tyree's ramp needs to be to make it from his window to the sidewalk. Well, his ramp would be represented by the hypotenuse of this right triangle. So we would want to figure out the value of x because the ramp would be that like wood plank that he would use right there. So we have 2 different lengths of that triangle. So what we could do, since it's a right triangle, is we could use the Pythagorean theorem to figure out the length of x. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. So a and b are always going to be your legs to the triangle. The legs are the sides that make up that right angle. So these are your legs. So we can say 4 squared plus 15 squared. Now the legs could be mixed up if you want. You could have written 15 squared plus 4 squared equals c squared, which is x squared. And so now we're going to go ahead and solve for x. 4 squared really means 4 times 4, which is 16. 15 squared, I believe, is 225, but we can double check. 15 squared is 225. I was correct. So 225 equals x squared. I'm going to have to move this up here. I'm running out of room, so let's add those together. 225 and 16. And so that'll give us 241. So 241 should equal x squared. To get the x by itself, the opposite of squaring x would be to square root it. So now we would have x equals the square root of 241. The square root of 241, and that would give us about 15, we'll say 15.5 to round to the nearest tenth. 15.5. These were in feet, so we should say 15.5 feet is how long the ramp will have to be. For part C, he knows that if the angle the ramp makes with the ground is more than 20 degrees, he will gain too much speed and lose control when he hits the sidewalk. What is the angle his ramp will make with the ground? Is the ramp safe? So I'm going to go ahead and draw the angle that we're trying to find in pink. So if we go back to this, we're trying to figure out the angle that the ramp makes with the ground here. So what we're given, I always like to go back to the given information, so it'll give me a more exact answer. We're given the opposite side length and we have the adjacent side length. So if we go back to SOHCAHTOA to think about which would be the best one to use for this, which trig ratio uses the opposite and the adjacent, that would be our tangent. So we're going to say the tangent of theta will equal the opposite over the adjacent. And then in our calculators, we would type in the inverse of tangent, 4 divided by 15, should equal theta. And then that way we can figure out our theta. So tangent to the -1, 4 divided by 15. Tangent to the -1, 4 divided by 15. So we get that the angle measure must be 14.9 degrees. We'll round to the nearest tenth. Since 3 is smaller than 5, we would not round up to 10, and we would just say 14.9. 14.9 degrees. So that is your angle measure. Now it says that if he knows that the angle the ramp makes with the ground is more than 20, he will gain too much speed and lose control. So is that angle bigger than 20? No, it's not. It is smaller. So that means his ramp is safe. Yes, it is safe. So that would give us the other point value for that. All right, now for the last one, we want to find the perimeter of the figure below. So the perimeter, let's get a different color so we don't mix up. The perimeter is when you add all the sides. So we need to find the length of all of the sides here. And so what we're missing is we are missing this length and we are missing this length. So what we can do is we can create a triangle here to help us figure out the length of x. Actually, and the length of z, because if we can find z, then we can find y. All of this should add up to 16. So if we find z, we can find y, or vice versa. I'm going to go ahead and change colors again. So if this length is 15, that means that this length has to be 15. So if this length is 15, but the whole side equals 20, that means that this length from here to here must be 5, because 5 plus 15 gives us that 20 centimeters that it says that side has to equal. Now it's also telling us this angle measure here is 25, and what we can do is if we have an angle measure and we have a side measure, we can have use trig ratios to figure out what those are. I'm going to first look for the value of x, and I'm going to use the 5. Now your 5 is adjacent to the angle measure we're given, and then the x is your hypotenuse because it's across from that right angle. So I'm going to look at my trig functions. SOHCAHTOA, and figure out which one would be the best for me to use. So I have the adjacent and I have the hypotenuse, so that means it would be best to use cosine in order to find x. So we're going to say the cosine of my angle measure, 25, should equal my adjacent side, which is 5, over my hypotenuse, which is x. And so now that I've set up that equation, I can go ahead and solve it. You can't solve for x when it's in the denominator first, so let's first multiply by x to get it out. Now we're left with 5 equals. I can't multiply x with the cosine of 25, so what I'm going to do is just rewrite it. Now I want to get the x by itself, so I'm going to divide by the cosine of 25 on both sides of the equations. And so now I want to use my calculator to do 5 divided by cosine 25. So we have 5 divided by cosine of 25. And that will give us a length of 5.5. We'll round to the nearest tenth, 5.5. So x is 5.5. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that information that I have here and replace it with what I know. Now I want to find, I need the length of y, but I don't think I'm going to find the length of y until I find the length of z. So let's now go back to the length of z. And I still want to use the 5 over here. It's still the adjacent side, but now I want to find z, which is the opposite side because it's on the opposite side of that angle that they give us, 25 degrees. So now if I have the adjacent and the opposite, that means I'm going to be using tangent to find that angle measure, or excuse me, to find that side length. So the tangent of the angle measure, 25, will equal the opposite, z, over the adjacent side, 5. So I want to get z by itself, so I'm going to have to undo the division of 5 by multiplying it. So z will equal 5 times the tangent of 25. We can go ahead and do that in the calculator. 5 times the tangent of 25, and we'll get about 2.3. We'll round to the nearest tenth, 2.3. So z is 2.3. So now we know that this is 2.3 here. Since all of this is 16, we can do 16 minus 2.3 to find out the value of y. So 16 minus 2.3 would give us 13.7. So now I know y is about 13.7. So now I can go around and add all of the lengths up to find my perimeter. So we have, for the perimeter, we have your 16 plus 20 is this entire side, plus 5.5 plus 13.7 plus 15. So let's go ahead and add those. So we have 20, 5.5, 20 plus 5.5, 13.7, 15 and 16. And so now we have, oh, what happened there? Equals, oh, 70.2. So the perimeter, oh, I don't like that. So the perimeter is 70.2 centimeters squared. I am going to go on a limb and guess that this was supposed to be centimeters and I accidentally left it to be meters. So the perimeter is 70.2 centimeters squared. And so we are done with that chapter 5 review for the team test. Now, if you need to, you can go ahead and rewatch the video or slow it down to help you solve the problems for that team test makeup that I sent you. Thank you. Please be patient with the grading. I'm doing the best as I can, and I know that you guys are doing the best that you can in returning all of these things. If you do have any questions, please feel free to answer me, and we will get through this last month and a half together, both giving each other a little bit of grace here. Have a good